It began with a whisper, one message sent across the stars, not in anger, but in finality. Earth had said no. No more diplomacy, no more appeasement, no more silence in the face of injustice. In the grand halls of the Galactic Council, where the voices of 1,000 species once echoed with pride, panic now reigned. Trade collapsed. Communication lines fell silent. Delegates shouted over one another, searching for answers that no longer existed. Aboard the human vessel Defiant, Captain Sarah Chen stared out into the void, not with fear, but with clarity. Earth's message wasn't just a withdrawal, it was a reckoning, a declaration that humanity would no longer be bent or broken. And far away, in the shadows of forgotten colonies and underground bunkers, one name began to surface again and again. Director Kane. Unknown to most, feared by the few who remembered, the architect of a silent rebellion now fully awake. The Council thought they could silence Earth. Instead, they awakened something far worse, human unity. This is the story of when Earth said no, and the galaxy paid the price. The Silent Rebellion. The message that shook the galaxy. The transmission arrived at exactly 14:32 Galactic Standard Time on a Tuesday that would be remembered forever. It wasn't dramatic, no explosions, no military fanfare, just a simple message broadcast simultaneously to every major system in the galaxy. The words were calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying to anyone who understood what they meant. Effective immediately, the Terran Federation withdraws from the Galactic Council. All treaties are void, all obligations terminated, all debts forgiven. We wish you well in your future endeavors. Signed, Director Kane, Terran Defense Authority. Captain Sarah Chen was drinking synthetic coffee in the mess hall of the TFS Defiant when the message played over the ship's communication system. The cup slipped from her fingers, shattering on the metal floor as conversations around her died into stunned silence. She had served in the Terran fleet for 15 years, fought in 3 border conflicts, and earned her captain's stripes defending human colonies from raiders the Council pretended didn't exist. But this was beyond anything she had imagined possible. "Captain to the bridge," came the urgent voice of her first officer, Commander Torres. Sarah ran through the corridors, her mind racing. She knew every regulation, every protocol, every chain of command in the Terran military structure. But she had never heard of any Director Kane. That should have been impossible. She had security clearance that went almost to the top of the military hierarchy. The bridge was chaos when she arrived. Officers were shouting over each other, trying to confirm the message's authenticity while monitoring incoming communications from across the galaxy. The main screen showed a flood of emergency broadcasts, diplomatic channels buzzing with frantic activity and trade routes suddenly going dark as human ships stopped responding to Council traffic control. "Status report," Sarah commanded, her voice cutting through the noise. Commander Torres turned to her, his face pale. "Ma'am, we've confirmed the message came from Earth Defense Command. Authentication codes check out, but there's more. Every human ship in space just received new orders. We're to report to designated rally points and await further instructions." Sarah felt her stomach drop. "What rally points? I never received any such orders." Torres handed her a data pad. "They came through 30 seconds after the withdrawal announcement, encrypted on a channel I didn't even know existed. Ma'am, these orders are signed with command codes that predate the Council by decades." As Sarah read the orders, a chill ran down her spine. The instructions were simple but comprehensive. All human vessels were to immediately cease cooperation with Council forces, withdraw from joint operations, and prepare for complete independence. Supply caches were listed, coordinates to hidden bases, communication protocols that had apparently been in place for years without her knowledge. "How long have they been planning this?" she whispered. The Council's emergency session. 3 hours after Earth's announcement, the Galactic Council convened its first emergency session in over a century. The Great Chamber on Council Prime, normally a place of careful diplomacy and measured debate, erupted into chaos as representatives from hundreds of species tried to speak at once. High Chancellor Vextai, a tall, crystalline being whose species had founded the Council millennia ago, called for order with his harmonic voice resonating through the chamber's acoustic amplifiers. His usually calm demeanor showed cracks of genuine concern. "Honored delegates," he began, his words translated into thousands of languages simultaneously. "We face an unprecedented situation. The humans have unilaterally withdrawn from our union. We must assess the implications and respond appropriately." Ambassador Kresh of the Valdari Empire, a military species that had long viewed humans with suspicion, rose to speak. His scaled features were twisted with barely concealed rage. "This is treason against galactic order. The humans have benefited from our protection, our trade, our technology. They cannot simply walk away from their obligations. What obligations? Interrupted Ambassador Lyra of the peaceful Nexari. Her bird-like features were ruffled with confusion. The humans have asked for little and given much. They have served as our military arm in conflicts we were too civilized to fight ourselves. Perhaps we should ask why they felt the need to leave rather than how to punish them for it. The chamber erupted again as different factions argued. Some called for immediate military action to bring the humans back into line. Others suggested economic sanctions. A few, mostly smaller species that had worked closely with humans, quietly wondered if perhaps the humans had good reasons for their dramatic departure. High Chancellor Vextai studied the data streaming across his personal display. Trade projections showed immediate disruption across 17 major shipping lanes. Military reports indicated human forces withdrawing from 43 active conflict zones. Most disturbing were the intelligence reports suggesting this withdrawal had been planned for years, possibly decades. The question, he said, his voice cutting through the arguments, is not whether we can force them to return. The question is whether we can survive without them. The human perspective. Aboard the Defiant, Captain Chen found herself facing a decision she had never expected to make. Stay loyal to the Terran Federation she had served her entire adult life, or remain with the Galactic Council that had shaped the galaxy she knew. But as reports flooded in from across human space, she began to understand that this choice had been made for her long ago. The data was staggering. Hidden military installations were revealing themselves across dozens of systems. Weapons caches buried on forgotten asteroids were being activated. Human colonies she thought were struggling settlements turned out to be well-fortified bases with defensive capabilities that rivaled Council military stations. How did they hide all this? Asked her tactical officer, Lieutenant Park. Sarah shook her head in amazement. They didn't hide it, we just never looked. Every supply run to struggling colonies, every mining expedition to worthless asteroids, every research mission to empty systems. They were building while we were serving. The communication officer, Ensign Rodriguez, looked up from her station with wide eyes. Captain, I'm receiving a priority transmission. It's from Director Kane. The main screen flickered to life, showing a man Sarah had never seen before. He appeared to be in his 60s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to look right through the camera. Behind him, she could see what looked like a massive command center bustling with activity. Captain Chen, Kane said, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. I know you have questions. We all do. But right now, I need you to trust in humanity's ability to stand on its own. You have new orders in your secure files. Follow them, and help us write the next chapter of human history. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in stunned silence. Sarah accessed her secure files and found detailed instructions for the Defiant. They were to proceed to a system she had never heard of, where they would join other human vessels in establishing a new defensive perimeter. Ma'am, Commander Torres said quietly, what are your orders? Sarah looked around at her crew, all human, all looking to her for guidance. They had served the Council faithfully, believing they were part of something greater than themselves. Now they had to decide whether they were humans first or Council citizens first. Set course for the coordinates in our new orders, she said firmly. It's time we found out what humanity can do when it stops asking for permission. The ripple effect news of Earth's withdrawal spread across the galaxy faster than light itself, carried by the quantum communication networks that connected every civilized world. The immediate reaction was panic, but not the kind the Council had expected. On the industrial world of Kepler Station, human engineers quietly shut down the fusion reactors that powered half the planet's manufacturing. They didn't sabotage anything or make demands. They simply stopped working and walked away, leaving their alien supervisors staring at machinery they didn't understand. In the Andorian sector, human traders recalled their cargo ships from scheduled runs, leaving entire supply chains broken. Colonies that had relied on human agricultural exports suddenly faced food shortages. Mining operations dependent on human engineering expertise ground to a halt. But the most shocking revelation came from the military sphere. Human forces had been involved in dozens of peacekeeping operations, anti-piracy patrols, and border conflicts across the galaxy. When they withdrew, the true scale of their contribution became immediately apparent. Crime rates spiked in systems that had relied on human patrols. Pirates emerged from hiding places to attack shipping lanes now left undefended. Border disputes that had been kept in check by human diplomatic military units flared into open conflicts. Admiral Zekthor of the Council Defense Force stood in his command center watching reports flood in from across the galaxy. As a Krathari, a species known for their strategic thinking, he had always recognized human military capabilities. But even he had underestimated their importance to galactic stability. "How many active operations are we losing?" he asked his aide. 47 major operations, Admiral, from anti-piracy patrols to full peacekeeping missions. The humans represented 32% of our active military force, but they were involved in 68% of our actual combat operations. Zekthor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep thought among his people. "And our reserves? Most of our member species maintain defensive forces only. The Valdari have a significant military, but they're already stretched thin with their own border disputes. The hegemony has numbers but lacks the tactical flexibility humans provided. Admiral, we're looking at a complete restructuring of galactic defense policy." The Admiral stared at the strategic display showing human forces withdrawing across dozens of systems. Red warning lights indicated brewing conflicts, supply chain failures, and security alerts. The galaxy was coming apart at the seams, and it had only been 6 hours since Earth's announcement. The mystery of Director Kane. As the initial shock wore off, questions began to emerge about the man who had signed humanity's Declaration of Independence. Director Kane was not a name in any official council database. He held no elected office, no military rank that appeared in public records, no diplomatic credentials. Council intelligence worked frantically to piece together his identity. What they found was more disturbing than a complete unknown would have been. Kane existed in fragments, mentioned in classified reports spanning decades but never as a central figure. A consultant on defensive strategies, an advisor on colonial development, a researcher into worst-case scenarios for human survival. Intelligence Director Mordan, a member of the telepathic scythe species, compiled the report personally. His mental abilities allowed him to process vast amounts of data simultaneously, finding patterns that others might miss. "He's been planning this for 30 years, Morden reported to the High Chancellor. "Every human colony placement, every trade agreement, every military deployment, they all serve a secondary purpose of ensuring human survival independent of the Council." "How is that possible?" demanded Chancellor Vextai. "Our intelligence services monitor all major strategic planning." "Because it wasn't centralized," Morden replied, his mental tendrils flickering with unease. "It was distributed across thousands of individuals, each making decisions that seemed logical in isolation but served a greater pattern. Kane wasn't commanding this network, he was conducting it like a symphony where each musician only knows their own part." The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just left the Council, they had been preparing to leave for decades. Every human who had served on council committees, every trade representative, every military officer had been gathering information and positioning resources for this moment. "What do we know about his current capabilities?" the Chancellor asked. Morden's report was grim. "Based on the assets that have revealed themselves in the past 8 hours, humanity has sufficient industrial capacity to sustain themselves indefinitely. Their hidden military installations suggest defensive capabilities that rival our core worlds, and their technological base—" He paused, his tendrils darkening. "Chancellor, I believe they may have technologies we haven't seen." The human colonies respond. Across the galaxy, human settlements that had seemed like struggling frontier communities suddenly revealed their true nature. New Victoria, supposedly a marginal agricultural colony, activated defense shields that could withstand capital ship bombardment. Port Asgard, thought to be a simple mining outpost, launched surveillance drones with sensor capabilities that surpassed anything in the Council fleet. Maria Santos, the civilian administrator of Haven Colony, stood in her office watching the transformation outside her window. Streets that had seemed almost primitive just hours ago now hummed with hidden machinery coming online. Citizens she had known for years revealed themselves as engineers, technicians, and military specialists who had been maintaining elaborate cover stories. "How long have you known?" she asked her deputy, James Wright, who was now wearing the uniform of what appeared to be a Terran intelligence officer. "About you specifically? 3 years, he replied honestly. "About the general plan? I've been part of it for 15 years. Maria, you're an excellent administrator, but you were never cleared for operational security. We needed genuine reactions from our civilian leadership." She sank into her chair, overwhelmed. "The farming equipment, the mining operations, the water treatment plants? All real, all necessary," James confirmed, "but also designed to serve military purposes if needed. Your agricultural planning created food security for a siege. Your infrastructure development created redundant systems that could survive attacks. Your social programs built the community cohesion we'd need for independence." Maria looked out at her colony, seeing it with new eyes. The community she had thought she was building had been part of something much larger. "Are we prisoners now?" James's expression softened. "You're free to leave if you want, but Maria, you helped build something amazing here. A human community that can stand on its own, defend itself, and thrive without asking anyone's permission. Isn't that worth being part of?" The Council's Dilemma. As the first day of humanity's independence drew to a close, the Galactic Council faced a crisis unlike any in its history. Emergency sessions continued around the clock as delegates struggled to understand the scope of the problem. The economic impact was immediate and severe. Human involvement in galactic commerce had been far more extensive than anyone realized. They weren't just participants, they were often the linchpin that made entire systems work. Without human logistics expertise, supply chains collapsed. Without human engineering, critical infrastructure failed. Without human agricultural knowledge, food security became a crisis on dozens of worlds. But the military implications were even worse. Reports were flooding in of conflicts erupting in regions where human peacekeepers had withdrawn. The Kraken Nebula, kept stable by human patrols, was now seeing its first pirate raids in 20 years. The Outer Rim, where human diplomats had mediated disputes between rival species, was experiencing a breakdown in communication that threatened to escalate into war. High Chancellor Vextai convened his inner council, the most senior representatives of the founding species. The crystal chamber where they met had been designed to promote calm deliberation, but tonight it felt more like a war room. "Options," he said simply. Ambassador Kresh spoke first, his militaristic nature leading him to the obvious solution. "We retake their colonies by force. They're scattered across hundreds of systems. We can't let this rebellion spread." "With what forces?" demanded Defense Admiral Zek Thor. "Our military relied heavily on human units. Without them, we're looking at months to mobilize sufficient forces, and that assumes other species are willing to commit their defensive fleets to offensive operations." Trade Commissioner Velnara, representing the Mercantile Guild, added her perspective. "Force is irrelevant if it destroys what we're trying to preserve. Human colonies are economically integrated into our systems. Military action would cause more damage than the withdrawal itself." "Then what do you suggest?" Chancellor Vextai asked. Velnara's response was quiet but clear. "We find out what they want and give it to them." The chamber fell silent. The idea of negotiating with rebels was anathema to many council members, but as reports continued to arrive showing the scope of galactic disruption, even the most prideful delegates began to realize they might have no choice. "And if what they want," said Ambassador Lyra thoughtfully, "is simply to be left alone?" That question hung in the air as the council faced the possibility that humanity might be lost to them forever. Outside the crystal chamber, the galaxy was learning what it meant to function without the species they had taken for granted. The lesson was harsh and immediate. Humanity had been the glue holding galactic civilization together. Now that glue was gone, and everything was starting to fall apart. The Awakening Storm. The network reveals itself. 3 weeks after the withdrawal, Captain Sarah Chen stood on the observation deck of Sanctuary Station, a massive space habitat that supposedly didn't exist a month ago. Through the transparent aluminum viewports, she watched an endless stream of human ships arriving from across the galaxy. Cargo vessels, passenger transports, military cruisers, and civilian craft of every description, all converging on coordinates that had been hidden in classified databases for decades. "It's incredible," said Commander Torres, joining her at the viewport. "Intelligence estimates suggest we've evacuated over 2 million humans from Council space in the past 3 weeks. Sarah nodded, still amazed by the scope of the operation. "And they all knew where to come. Every ship captain, every colony administrator, every family group. They had their evacuation plans ready." What she was witnessing was the culmination of the most extensive covert operation in galactic history. For 30 years, a network of human agents had been quietly preparing for this moment. They had established hidden supply depots, built secret communication networks, and created backup plans for every human settlement in Council space. Dr. Elizabeth Harper, the station's chief administrator, approached them with a datapad in hand. Sarah had known Harper for years as a xenobiology researcher, but like so many others, that had apparently been just her cover identity. "Captain Chen, we've received new intelligence from our sources still operating in Council space," Harper said. "The situation is deteriorating faster than our models predicted." The data was sobering. Council military forces were stretched to breaking point trying to maintain order in systems where human peacekeepers had withdrawn. Economic disruption was cascading through sectors that had relied on human expertise. Worst of all, several species were beginning to question whether the Council itself was worth preserving. The Nexari have officially protested the Council's handling of the human withdrawal, Harper continued. They're demanding answers about why humanity felt the need to leave. The Alterian Trade Confederation has suspended new agreements pending a review of Council policies. Even some of the founding species are asking uncomfortable questions. Sarah studied the reports with growing amazement. They're turning on each other. Not exactly, Harper replied. They're starting to realize that the Council wasn't as strong as they thought. Human contributions held the whole system together, and now that we're gone, the cracks are showing. Director Kane's revelation. The first public appearance of Director Kane came not as a broadcast to the galaxy, but as a private message to the human refugees gathering at Sanctuary Station. Sarah and thousands of others crowded into the station's main assembly hall to hear from the man who had orchestrated their liberation. Kane appeared older in person than he had in his brief transmission weeks ago. His gray hair and lined face spoke of decades spent carrying the weight of impossible decisions, but his eyes held a clarity that commanded immediate attention. You have questions, he began without preamble. You deserve answers. For 30 years, a network of dedicated humans has worked to ensure our species' survival, not because we plan to leave the Council, but because we recognize that depending entirely on others for our security was a luxury we couldn't afford. He activated a holographic display that showed the galaxy as it existed today. Human settlements were marked in blue, Council territory in green, and neutral space in gray. What became immediately apparent was that humans had been far more widely distributed than anyone had realized. We are not rebels, Kane continued. We are not terrorists or separatists. We are a species that chose to take responsibility for its own future. Every human who participated in this network did so voluntarily, knowing they might be called upon to sacrifice their comfort for their species' independence. Sarah listened with growing respect for the man and the impossible task he had undertaken. The logistics alone were staggering. Coordinating the actions of millions of humans across hundreds of systems, all while maintaining the appearance of loyal Council citizens. But why now? Asked a voice from the crowd. Sarah recognized Captain Morrison of the transport ship New Horizon. What triggered the withdrawal? Kane's expression darkened. Because we discovered the Council's true agenda for humanity. They weren't our partners or allies. They were managing us, controlling our development, limiting our growth. And when they thought we were sufficiently dependent on them, they planned to make that dependence permanent. The assembly hall fell silent as Kane activated another display. This one showed classified Council documents, internal communications, and strategic planning reports that painted a disturbing picture of humanity's place in galactic civilization. Project Shepard, Kane said grimly. A classified Council initiative to gradually reduce human military capabilities while increasing our economic dependence. Phase 1 involved restricting our access to advanced technologies. Phase 2 would limit our colonial expansion. Phase 3. He paused, letting the implications sink in. Phase 3 involved biological controls to reduce human aggression and independence. Gasps and angry murmurs rippled through the crowd. Sarah felt her own anger rising as she processed what Kane was revealing. The Council hadn't just been taking humanity for granted. They had been actively working to make humans more manageable. How did you discover this? Morrison asked. We had friends, Kane replied simply. Not all Council species supported Project Shepard. The Nexari warned us. The Alterian Trade Confederation shared intelligence. Even some Valdari military officers found the plan distasteful. Turns out humanity has more allies than we knew. The Underground Railroad. As Kane's revelation sank in, Sarah began to understand the true scope of the human resistance network. It hadn't just been about preparation for independence. It had been about survival against a system designed to gradually eliminate human agency. Lieutenant Park approached her with a communication pad. Captain, we're receiving reports from across the evacuation network. It's not just our people who are asking for help. The reports were startling. Non-human families, individuals, and even small communities were requesting passage to human-controlled space. Scientists whose research had been suppressed by Council bureaucracy, traders who had been squeezed out by Council monopolies, military officers who had grown disgusted with Council politics. They want to defect to us? Sarah asked in amazement. More than that, Park replied. They want to join us. Captain, we're not just evacuating humans anymore. We're becoming a destination for anyone who wants to live free of Council control. Dr. Harper confirmed this trend from her position coordinating refugee movements. We've had to establish separate processing facilities for non-human refugees. The Nexari delegation includes 3 of their most prominent scientists. The Alterian group brought industrial replicators and manufacturing expertise. Even some Valdari warriors have requested asylum. Sarah shook her head in wonder. We're not just leaving the council, we're taking their best people with us. The transformation was happening faster than anyone had anticipated. What had begun as a human withdrawal was becoming a broader exodus of individuals and groups who shared humanity's values of independence and self-determination. The Council's desperation. In the gleaming towers of Council Prime, emergency sessions had become a permanent state of affairs. High Chancellor Vex Tai looked haggard as he reviewed the latest reports from across Council space. The situation was spiraling beyond their ability to control it. "Status report," he commanded wearily. Intelligence Director Morden's mental tendrils flickered with distress as he compiled the latest data. 27 star systems have experienced significant civil unrest. 12 species have formally protested our handling of the human situation. 5 trade routes have been permanently disrupted, and we've confirmed that key personnel from 31 different species have defected to human space. Defected, the Chancellor repeated bitterly. We don't call them defectors. We call them misguided individuals who will return once this crisis is resolved. Chancellor, Admiral Zekthor interrupted. With respect, the crisis is not going to resolve itself. Our military capacity has been reduced by 40%. Our economic output is down 22%, and intelligence suggests the humans are not just surviving their independence, they're thriving. The Admiral activated a holographic display showing human space as Council intelligence understood it. The network of hidden bases, manufacturing facilities, and defensive positions was staggering in its scope and sophistication. They've been building a parallel civilization for decades, Zekthor continued. Industrial capacity, military infrastructure, research and development facilities. They're not refugees hiding in the wilderness. They're a fully functional interstellar power that was hiding inside our own territory. Ambassador Kresh slammed his scaled fist on the conference table. Then we crush them before they become stronger. Every day we delay gives them more time to consolidate their positions. With what forces? Demanded Trade Commissioner Velnara. Our military is already stretched to its limit maintaining order in our remaining territory. A war with humanity would leave us defenseless against external threats. Chancellor Vex Tai studied the strategic display with growing dread. The humans hadn't just left. They had taken with them the stability that had held galactic civilization together for centuries. Without their peacekeeping forces, ancient conflicts were reigniting. Without their economic expertise, trade networks were collapsing. Without their technological innovation, entire industries were stagnating. What are our options? He asked quietly. The room fell silent as the assembled leaders contemplated a question that had no good answers. Military action seemed impossible given their reduced capabilities. Economic sanctions were meaningless against a civilization that had achieved self-sufficiency. Diplomatic overtures had been ignored or rejected. There is one possibility, said Ambassador Lyra hesitantly. We could ask them what they want. The suggestion was met with shocked silence. The idea of the mighty Galactic Council negotiating with rebels was almost unthinkable. But as reports continued to arrive showing the extent of galactic destabilization, even the most prideful delegates began to consider the unthinkable. The technology revelation. Sarah's understanding of humanity's capabilities expanded dramatically when she was granted access to the research facilities hidden within Sanctuary Station. What she found there challenged everything she thought she knew about human technological development. Dr. Marcus Webb, the facility's director, led her through laboratories that rivaled anything she had seen on Council worlds. We've been developing independently for 3 decades, he explained as they walked past advanced manufacturing systems and prototype technologies, not just maintaining Council equipment, but pushing beyond what they thought possible. The tour was revelation after revelation. Fusion reactors that were more efficient than anything in Council space. Faster than light communications that didn't rely on Council networks. Defensive technologies that could neutralize weapon systems the Council considered state-of-the-art. How is this possible? Sarah asked as she examined a prototype starship drive that seemed to bend space-time in ways she didn't understand. Because we never stopped innovating, Webb replied. The Council encouraged technological stagnation. They wanted stable, predictable development that they could control. But human nature doesn't work that way. We kept pushing boundaries, kept asking what if, kept trying to make things better. He led her to a secure vault containing the most classified projects. Project Prometheus, he said, activating a display that showed schematics for technologies that seemed almost magical. Self-repairing materials that can adapt to any environment. Artificial intelligence systems that can solve problems the Council considers unsolvable. Energy generation techniques that could power entire civilizations. Sarah stared at the displays in amazement. We've surpassed them. In some areas, yes, Webb confirmed, but more importantly, we've surpassed their limitations. They built a civilization based on control and stability. We're building one based on growth and possibility. The new alliances. The transformation of human space from a refugee destination to a galactic power became evident when the first formal diplomatic delegation arrived at Sanctuary Station. Sarah watched from the observation deck as a Nexari diplomatic vessel approached, followed by ships from the Alterian Trade Confederation and, most surprisingly, a small fleet of Valdari warships. Director Kane met the delegations personally, a clear signal of the importance humanity placed on these new relationships. Sarah was invited to observe the proceedings as a representative of the human military. Ambassador Thel Nara of the Nexari spoke first, her bird-like features animated with excitement. Director Kane, my people have monitored your development with great interest. We believe a formal alliance would benefit both our species. Kane's response was measured but warm. We welcome friendship with the Nexari, but we need to be clear about what alliance with humanity means. We will not be junior partners in anyone else's empire. We will not subordinate our interests to a larger authority. We offer partnership among equals. The Alterian representative, Trademaster Korvash, leaned forward with obvious interest. That is precisely what we hope to hear. The Council's hierarchical structure has stifled innovation and limited opportunities for millennia. We propose a new model based on mutual benefit rather than centralized control. Even more surprising was the Valdari response. War leader Grakthos, a massive being whose species was known for their military prowess, spoke with unexpected respect. The Valdari have watched humanity fight. We have seen your courage, your ingenuity, your refusal to surrender even against impossible odds. These are qualities we admire. We would be honored to stand with you as battle brothers. Sarah realized she was witnessing the birth of something unprecedented in galactic history. Not an empire built on conquest or a federation held together by bureaucracy, but a true alliance of species united by shared values and mutual respect. Kane seemed to understand the historical significance of the moment as well. Then let us build something new together. A civilization where intelligence is valued over authority, where innovation trumps regulation, where beings are judged by their contributions rather than their origins. The Council's last gambit. Faced with the collapse of their authority and the rise of a human-led alliance, the Galactic Council made a desperate decision. If they couldn't bring humanity back through negotiation or intimidation, they would try force. Admiral Zekthor stood in the command center of the Council fleet's flagship, watching as hundreds of warships assembled for what was being called a peacekeeping operation. The official story was that they were moving to protect Council citizens from human aggression. The reality was that they were preparing for a war they weren't sure they could win. Fleet status, he commanded. His aide, a young Krathari officer, consulted his displays nervously. 437 vessels ready for action, Admiral. However, we're experiencing significant logistical challenges. Fuel supplies are inconsistent without human-managed supply chains. Maintenance crews are reporting difficulties with systems that relied on human technical expertise. Zekthor's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep concern. Even their preparations for war were being hampered by humanity's absence. And intelligence on human defensive capabilities? Limited, sir. Our sources suggest they have significant defensive installations, but we lack details on their actual military strength. The humans were always skilled at operational security, and now that they're actively hostile, our intelligence gathering has become much more difficult. The Admiral studied the tactical displays showing human space. What had once seemed like scattered settlements now looked like a carefully planned defensive network. Every human colony was positioned to support others, every installation built to serve multiple purposes. Sir, his communication officer interrupted, we're receiving a transmission from Sanctuary Station. From humanity? Zekthor asked with surprise. Yes, sir, it's addressed to you personally. The main screen flickered to life, showing Director Kane in what appeared to be a military command center. Behind him, Sarah could see activity that suggested a major operation in progress. Admiral Zekthor, Kane said without preamble, I know about your fleet movements. I know about your orders. I also know that you're an honorable soldier who takes no pleasure in unnecessary conflict. Zekthor straightened, impressed despite himself by the human's directness. Director Kane, are you calling to surrender? Kane's slight smile was anything but submissive. I'm calling to offer you a chance to avoid a war that will destroy both our civilizations. You have 400 ships, we have... Well, you'll find out if you proceed with your attack. But before you do, consider this. Every species in your fleet has members who have defected to our alliance. Your own crews may not be as loyal as you think. The transmission ended, leaving Zekthor staring at a blank screen. Almost immediately, reports began coming in from across the fleet. Sabotage attempts, crew members requesting transfer to human space, entire ships reporting technical difficulties that prevented them from maintaining formation. The Admiral realized with growing horror that Kane had been right. The Council's authority was so eroded that even their own military forces were unreliable. The war they were planning might be over before it began, not through defeat in battle but through the collapse of their own forces. As if summoned by his thoughts, High Chancellor Vextai appeared on his personal communication channel. Admiral, what is the status of the fleet? Zekthor looked around his command center, noting the uncertain expressions of his officers, the reports of malfunctions piling up on his displays, the general air of reluctance that permeated his flagship. Chancellor, he said slowly, I believe we may have a problem.